Welcome back to another episode and another stroll. We're starting on a weird road tonight. It's actually a dead end that I hardly ever get to go down because how often are you gonna? And I have an equally odd selection of movies for you this week. Starting off with one I came in to watch because I needed something with a little more variety. And so I turned on one where there's debate about whether or not it's actually a horror movie. And that is Eve's Bayou, which is a late 90s, I believe 1997, Southern Gothic drama. And that's kind of where the debate comes in as to whether or not it's a horror film. Because Southern Gothic movies, they're kind of like murder mysteries in that like they can be horror, but they're not necessarily horror. And I've had several, I've seen several over the years. There's ones like Sister Sister. Has enough supernatural and outright horror elements that it's still obviously a horror movie, even though it's mostly a Southern Gothic. Sam Raimi did like really popular one with The Gift. That one too, like it's kind of on the cusp, but I think there's enough supernatural elements where you can pretty easily just, be in agreement that it's a horror movie. But so Eve's Bayou, I hadn't really ever heard the debate about it until I think it was about half a year ago. It was during one of the Criterion sales, or Criterion Collection sales at Barnes & Noble. On their website, you can kind of look up what they carry by genre, what they release by genre. It's good when you need a reminder. And when I was going through, there's some of the usual stuff, Onibaba, some of the David Lynch movies, things like that. And they had Eve's Bayou in there, and I was like, I always thought that was a drama. And so when you look it up, you'll find, depending on where you go, some places just strictly call it drama, some will call it a horror, some will call it a thriller, that old chestnut, because then you don't really have to, admit one way or another. And there are articles about it. There are people that declare it like one of the great black-centric horror movies. And so there was a Criterion sale again in July. So I decided to get it, finally bite, and figured that would kind of help me mix up my viewing of late. So the movie was, I think, 97, and it's got a huge cast. Some people, like, you won't know their names, but you'll recognize them from a show, from another movie. Obviously, the biggest name in the cast is Sam Jackson, which he also, I think, helped produce the movie as well. But yeah, you'll just catch all sorts of people that have just been around for decades, and then even like the child actors in it ended up growing up. Like the main girl, Eve, is I think it's Journey Smollett. Her older sister is Megan Good. So these people kept up, and so it's a massive cast. The director, I think her name is Casey. Oh god, I can't remember her name, because I don't think I've ever actually seen anything else she's done other than maybe some TV episodes. She's done things like Love and Basketball, mostly drama stuff once again. And this was like her own idea. She had written it years before and finally put it to the camera. And it is very, very, very Southern Gothic. And that's like, it's largely this big family and their weird psycho problems with elements of the supernatural, in this case, psychic powers and voodoo. Well, there's a little bit of like ghosty-ish stuff. I say ish. But the storyline, so, Deep South, fairly wealthy, well-to-do black family. The dad's doctor. And he's the town doctor. It's largely it's an African American community. It's somewhere in Louisiana. We're not quite sure where. At least I don't think they ever declare. I mean, they declare the locations, but since it's a fictional location, it's just a bayou. But the opening section of the movie, family's having a party. You get some character introductions. You get some weird events, some odd interactions, and the youngest daughter, Eve, at one point runs out to like the barn and hunkers down and takes a nap in the car. Where I'm not sure it's a car. I think it may just be a wagon. And when she wakes up in the middle, a little later, middle of the night, she sees her dad humping another lady, not her mom. This just completely throws the little girl's, world for a loop right then and there. And so a lot of the drama revolves around the doctor's, a skirt chaser. He helps out a lot of his patients in more ways than one. Big surprise. It's Sam Jackson in this movie. Like, yeah, he's womanizing everywhere he goes. But the creepy thing within the family is that both daughters, the teenage one, well, I think Eve's supposed to be about 10, and then her sister's supposed to be like 14-ish or something like that. Both are a little too in love with their daddy as well. And so, like, even when Eve discovers, him cheating, it doesn't seem so much that she's offended that he's cheating on her mother or the family, but that it's like taking affection away from her. And yeah, the older daughter is even more so. She's very much favored. She, will wait up for daddy from work. You get some weird stuff. And kind of the split side of that is there's a storyline involving Sam Jackson's character's sister, who was like a town psychic, clairvoyant. And she believes that she's cursed because she has this history of falling in love and marrying and her husband's dying. This just keeps happening. And so, yeah, she's where a lot of the supernatural elements of the film come in. And she also kind of has this slight rivalry with another local psychic and voodoo practitioner. But yeah, it's, like I said, it is largely a drama. There was, I can see why there's a debate about whether it falls into horror film or not. Because even the way it opens with kind of sinister music and creepy imagery. Plus, being in a bayou, yeah, everything's creepy and gross and weird, and there's storms and everything. The family, they even have I'm not exactly sure what his issue's supposed to be. Like, he's not mute. He may be, like, mentally ill. You're not quite sure, but like, he's the family uncle, and he's off, and he's kind of just like routinely in the background in his wheelchair. Yeah, and so you have all these different elements. And like I said, you had the psychosocial, the psychosexual element with the family. So there's a lot that you could rope into being a horror film, but it does play very, very dramatic. So at the end of the movie, me and my brother were kind of discussing that. He thinks no, it's just a drama. There's nothing inherently spooky or scary enough or weird enough for it to qualify as a horror film. For me, I would say I lean a little bit towards it being a horror novel, or being a horror movie. Do I want to keep saying novel tonight? I think there's enough there to put it over in that section. But I like to cheat too, because, like, as somebody who does like a movie a night marathon in October, it's kind of nice when you have something that, like, you can cheat with. Like, oh yeah, this is spooky enough, but gives me a different genre feel. But as to its quality, I'm not 100% sure where I fall on it. I mean, it's definitely a good film. There are issues. For one, this goes along with being Southern Gothic, but it is very, very theatrical. Like, sometimes kind of comically so. People's emotions are real big. Their reactions are real big. So there's elements of that like kind of take you out. And even some production issues, like the music. The score is mostly good and is usually on point. But there are some odd scenes, like near the end there's a portion involving some voodoo, so it's kind of a creepier, more sinister part of the film. And for some reason the soundtrack turns more towards it's kind of like twinkly Kid Adventure music for a little bit. So yeah, so it has some tonal issues with that. And then the ending's kind of a goof too, because like the ending is intentionally muddled and unclear because that's the point of the movie. But that also puts you in a weird area because it means the ending you get is muddled and unclear. So, but by and large, production's really, actually the production's great. You get tons of like outdoor tracking shots in the deep south. You got good atmosphere. Oh, somebody's got something playing out there. Yeah, there's a lot of really well done stuff. But at the same time, I found it absorbing, but I didn't really find it all that emotionally affecting. Which that can also be kind of a Southern Gothic thing. They often go just a little bit. They go so large on the number of characters or the weird complexities of the storyline that they kind of forget proper depth and character development and emotional theming. And so you can just get kind of lost and like not totally care what happens. And so yeah, I find that happens a lot with that genre. But yeah, it definitely is a good watch. So especially if you're looking for something where like you want something a little bit more serious, not really concerned with being scary, but having some spooky elements to it. It's very much worth a watch on that. And I mean, if you do consider it like among kind of like African American centric horror movies, it becomes all the more unique because a lot of my favorites in that genre, well, in that subgenre, is stuff that veers a little more goofy, like Blackula. Even something like with as many serious themes as like People Under the Stairs is kind of a silly movie. And so to have something this kind of serious and kind of respectable, it's an interesting take. So it's definitely worth a view for a lot of people. But you just gotta expect it's kind of like a very dramatic old stage play sometimes. But yeah, I would say qualifies as horror. Is pretty dang good. I don't think it makes like... I don't think it would ever make like the essentials list, but depending on the person, it could get close, I think. And so, after that, I wanted something more obviously kind of like outright horror-ish. And my viewing pile at the moment is massive, but what I decided to go with was an upgrade. I got an upgraded copy of a movie I've only seen once before, which is the 1993-94 Abel Ferrara version of the Body Snatchers, which I had this originally on like one of those 4 feature DVDs. I think it had like Wolfen and I can't remember what else with it. And that's the one time I had seen the movie before, and I don't recall being very like big on it. And I wasn't even really sure why. I only remembered a couple of scenes from the movie. Of course, it doesn't help that it's the third version of that storyline. You had Invasion of the Body Snatchers, which I haven't seen in forever. I mean, I recall it being decent, but I haven't seen that one in a long time. Because the 70s version with Donald Sutherland and Leonard Nimoy and stuff, that's like cream of the crop. That thing's outstanding. So you're making a third version, trying to come off like 2 classics. That's a tough act to do right there. And one of these days I actually need to remember to watch, because there's the Invasion from like 2006 with Nicole Kidman and Daniel Craig, and I have never ever seen that one. So I need to like finish up my Body Snatchers collection at some point. But so the early 90s version, directed by Abel Ferrara, so it is kind of interesting. It does take a different approach to the storyline. So instead of being like in a town or city and having that kind of larger scope, and it doesn't even, it doesn't even have like the wide array of characters that like the 70s version had. This one is a family going to work at a military base in Alabama. And so, and the military base is a really good setting, and that lingers from... Apparently there were multiple versions of the script for the movie. Because I think it was the writer of like the original version Or maybe he was the writer of the remake version. He was the writer of one of the other, versions of it. Or heck, maybe it was the guy who wrote the original story. I'm losing track. But he had kind of put together an idea that would sort of just be like a different take, not necessarily a remake. And at one point he had Larry Cohen, guy who's done some great stuff, like the It's Alive trilogy, God Told Me to handle the script. And so it would seem he came up with the idea for the military base, because, that place is already kind of, it strips people of their identities. Everyone's kind of bland, uniformed, hard to tell who's who. So it's a really good setting for that kind of storyline. But then I guess that script later got rewritten by Stuart Gordon of like Reanimator and From Beyond. And he had more of like just a gory, fun version of it. And then all that stuff got touched up yet again by another writer when Ferrera came on. So there is a lot of interesting talent involved behind the scenes on it. But the script definitely has some issues, as does the movie as a whole. But going back to watch it, I ended up liking it significantly better than the first time. But yeah, so for this one's story, like I said, it's a family. They're going to work at a military base because the dad actually works for like the EPA, and for some reason this base has a bunch of toxic chemicals stored there, and he has to make sure that they're not spilling out or anything. He's got his teenage daughter from his first wife, his new wife played by Meg Tilly, and then their son. And the teenage girl is our main character for the feature, and she's played by Gabrielle Anwar, who back in the day I think she was most popular for I'd say Wild Hearts Can't Be Broken, but that may just be because my sister watched that movie all the time. She may not have been popular at all, I'm not sure. But I think probably her best known thing now is probably multiple seasons of Burn Notice from USA. But back in this, she gets kind of the short end of the stick a little bit. Because for one, she narrates the film, and she is not a great narrator. And it's not helped by some pretty heavy-handed narration dialogue. But it almost kind of looked like when I was researching that this is almost like it almost seems a little bit like a Blade Runner situation, where that was something the studio wanted in to help explain the movie. And so, yeah, that was something that easily could have been avoided. But outside of some of her performance issues, her character is just like, she's teenage girl. That's her character. She mopes, she listens to music, she goes out with her friends looking for boys. Ta-da. She does not have an interesting personality at all. So yeah, she kind of gets shafted there. And most of the other characters are fairly thinly drawn, which, like I said, can help with the whole invasion aspect. Easily the best performer in it, though, is Meg Tilly, because I'll have to spoil it a little bit. It's not like the movie doesn't play too secret with it, but she eventually gets, pod-personed, body snatched, and when she goes into her pod-person mode, she gets the best scenes, she gets the best dialogue, she gets a speech that apparently Meg Tilly herself came up with. That's like the best part of the movie. And she even gets to do the alien point and scream from the 70s version. And they do such a great job with the shot of it. When she does it, they kind of do like a dolly zoom and use like lights at her feet and behind her to like amplify her more. Really fun stuff there. So, in fact, that's probably the highlight of the movie, is there's a section where some of the other family members are almost body snatched. She kind of gets revealed to them, kind of reveals herself to them, and things pick up from there. Yeah, there are some really, really good scenes. There's some pretty gnarly special effects. I was really impressed with the cinematography. Like, the thing's filmed amazing, but once again, I feel like it's almost like a little bit of a cheat, you know, because in more recent weeks you watch some more modern movies where just everything's tight. You know, you don't get any good tracking shots unless it's like an obnoxious action scene. You know, so getting this thing where like people go for a walk and you see entire neighborhoods with extras, natural lighting, you know, you just get much more interesting filmmaking. And so yeah, like, yeah, cinematography is amazing. The music is pretty bad. It's kind of bad 90s scary sci-fi music. And the editing comes up short, and that apparently may have had some stuff to do with the studio. And it mostly comes to a head at the end of the film, because they have like this last portion where it turns a little actiony for a moment. There's an attack helicopter, craploads of explosions. I mean, you don't usually expect exploding trucks and, you know, and buildings in your fairly inexpensive horror movie. But then again, it was the early 90s. It was a different time. But the way that portion's edited is really sloppy. You know, it's accompanied by some really lame narration from Anwar. And then the actual ending shot and sound bed is just... It's that unnecessary... You know, you basically diffuse the threat in your horror movie, but then at the end you want to make sure people still fear the threat. And so you just have some like weird dialogue or weird scene that doesn't make any sense. And yeah, they do that. And so yeah, going back, it's like, yeah, I get why I wasn't huge on it the first time, because it isn't, you know, it doesn't have the atmosphere of the original. It's nowhere near as good as the 70s version. And it has some really sloppy stuff, but the stuff that it lands, some of the effects, the general filming of it, Meg Tilly stuff, and it is pretty scary, actually. Like, I mean, for me, it's not a big deal, but like, I could kind of imagine, like, if you're kind of a kid, or just, you meet those people who just suck at horror movies and watching them, yeah, this could actually kind of nerve them out a little bit. It's got pretty good level of anxiety to it. And so, having viewed it again, like, I'm gonna come back to that one more often than I obviously have in the past. But, you know, it's just in that sad situation where, okay, third in line, and as far as I know, third in quality. I'll have to wait until I actually see the invasion to, you know, make like a full judgment on all of them. Good Lord, I am gassy tonight. Hope you guys are enjoying that. Yeah, so Body Snatchers, though, if any of y'all need that kind of like early 90s sci-fi horror stuff, that is very entertaining. And the newer edition that we watched, it was a 4K from Vinegar Syndrome, is very, very spiffy. It looks surprisingly nice for, like, this is weird because I praise the cinematography. It's an ugly movie. Like, it has really good shots, but it's intentionally ugly because it's, you know, military bases and that sort of stuff. So then my third movie for the night, this is where things went a little bit downhill, was Dial D for Demons, which is from Hong Kong, from I think it said 2000. And it is, oh my lord, an absolute mess. So it's directed by Billy Tang, who I don't think I've ever seen any of his films before, but it kind of looks like he mostly did kind of trashier stuff, lower grade action movies, kind of generic horror stuff. And it also seems like he had kind of a, what's the word am I looking for? A tendency for very attractive casts filmed in such a ways as to show off that they're attractive. Like a case in point would be... Oh, that's one. Case in point would be the cast in this. Some very gorgeous women And there are a lot of shots from far down on the floor of them in skimpy shorts and the like. The plotline, though, I mean, it's really basic. It starts off seeming like a comedy. Bunch of coworkers, they're gonna go to a rental vacation home because the one guy keeps getting in trouble with his girlfriend. Said guy can see ghosts. Nobody really takes it seriously. It's very goofy, and it's that kind of Hong Kong very silly humor. So seemingly it starts off like, oh, this is going to be a comedy horror movie. Over time, it starts to take itself more seriously, but it never really draws the line of when it cuts over. So later in the movie, you're like, wait, is this supposed to be funny or is it supposed to be serious? Because it's not working on either front. And yeah, it's a mess. Because once again, going back to that storyline, because I'm not going to have much background stuff for you. Most of the actors weren't in other things, or at least not a ton. Yeah, there's nothing really interesting about its origin. It's just an early 2000s schlocky kind of ghost movie. It says Dial D for demons, but by and large it's ghosts. And it's seemingly trying to cash in on sort of the J horror stuff that was building up. Because the ghost / demon is a curse thing. And that was probably the thing I laughed at the most in the movie, is the storyline, the backstory for the ghost is preposterous. Because it involves a genocide from centuries earlier, leading to haunted charcoal being used by someone with certain dates in their birthday on a certain night with a certain planetary alignment, which then causes the curse. It is baffling. At the same time, it is a bad movie. It's not scary. It's not emotionally engrossing. It has this very lengthy scene where a guy who's now a ghost seemingly converts to Christianity to help defeat the evil, which then is immediately not defeated. Yeah, its tone is all over the place. It's just, it's kind of that perfect, it's a bad movie and there's not much to say about it. So, but at the same time, it was still mildly entertaining enough that, I'm not mad. You know, I have bad movies where, I'm mad after I watch them because, oh my god, that ate some of my time and life force. This one's like, okay, this was just bad. But, I'll live. And so, after that one, I think I took a little walk after that one because I'd binged quite a bit by that point. And so for my fourth for the night, I needed something a little bit shorter. Thankfully, since I'd gotten on that Criterion sale, I had Fiend Without a Face, which I have considered buying for years, but I never did because there was only ever their release, and they've never readjusted the price on it. So even though it's an old DVD, it's number 40 something in their collection, it is still as expensive as some. Actually, it was more expensive than one of their Blu-rays I bought, because they've never gone back and kind of altered the pricing. But I knew it as this 1950s British sci-fi horror flick, and I like a lot of the old Hammer stuff, especially more than Amicus or things like that. But I enjoy a lot of that stuff, and I've even been thinking of a storyline to kind of pursue in sort of that tone and style, so watching something like that seemed a good idea. And thankfully this one is very entertaining. I was a little zoned out by this point because this is the fourth movie in a night, plus on a night when I'd had a lot of rich food too. But it's got a lot of the standard tropes. It's set at a military base that's kind of isolated. It's America is doing radiation testing. Well, I think it's radiation powered radar in a portion of Manitoba, Canada. Of course, this is all filmed in England, but they pull off the effect mostly well. You can obviously tell you're dealing with like English and Scottish actors and such, and not, you know, Canadians/Americans. But there's like the typical military general, well, sergeant, whatever he is, who's kind of in charge of everything, and he's the dashing hero. And he's got like kind of his younger buddy partner, the attractive secretary of the scientist who gets to be the love, the love object. It's all pretty standard on a lot of that front. What makes it kind of unique is the monster stuff. Initially, you don't see the monsters. You see what they affect. So lots of like strings being used to like pull objects over, all that sort of stuff. And you hear them, but you don't see them. Once they actually get to the explanation of what they are, it's not too much longer before you actually get to the reveal, where they actually become visible. And they're actually done largely in claymation. Like, they have some regular props that they use as well, but they use a lot of claymation to pull off the monster effects, which is pretty novel for the 50s. And they also use that to give them that little extra gore, because like when the monsters get shot, they pour out like brain fluid and stuff like that. And they are gross monsters. They're basically like brain and spine slugs almost, except without the shell. And they're vampires, so they'll suck your brains dry essentially. Yeah, so think of like small, smaller, squigglier versions of the brain bug from Starship Troopers. And yeah, once they pop in, those last like 15-20 minutes of the movie, it gets significantly more violent, significantly more interesting as well, because it's just got a lot more activity level at that point in the movie than most of your like 50s sci-fi ones did. And so that's where you can see like kind of the legacy that it got. And I guess there have even been multiple attempts to kind of make a sequel, and they've just never happened. But for one of those types, it was kind of the theme somewhat of that night. Because like, East Bayou, really good for what it is, not necessarily top tier. Like I said, some people could definitely take it that way. I just don't think it's necessarily 100% top tier. Yeah, Body Snatchers good, but not top tier. Yeah, and Fiend Without a Face. If you're in the mood for old-fashioned, black and white, atomic age horror, it is a really strong one. I just wouldn't say it's necessarily top tier. But definitely one that's worth checking out. I would love it though if someday somebody other than Criterion had it, so it could be something somewhat more affordable. Because like it's a perfect movie to be on like a weird, kind of collection or something like that, just nice Blu-ray collection, where it's part of the package as opposed to, $40 MSRP for a, like I said, a DVD, which that early in their catalog was probably late 90s. And just no one's gotten to do anything with it since. But yeah, that was the night's selection. I don't really have any extra topics to touch on tonight, mostly because I noticed my new settings are draining the battery faster than normal, which is why you probably noticed me speeding up the last two reviews. But I think they're allowing for much better light, so that's going to be great. But I thank you guys once again for joining me. I'm noticing to pace my walking better, because I notice I have a tendency to walk at my normal walking pace, not my walk and talk pace, which ends up why I start getting out of breath. And yeah, I'm starting to work on clearing that up. But once again, I thank you guys. I hope you enjoyed, and we can make the show better as we go. You know the thing, click on the buttons if you like anything. Bye.